Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about the lower limb muscles. And you have a pink handout that shows a list of muscles and their attributes that looks like this. This is page 1, the front page of this. And right away, you see columns of information. This first column that you see here lists the names of the muscles that are found in the lower limb that we're going to learn. The other columns that are wide, like these and these two over here, contain facts that we are going to learn about these muscles. And we won't learn them all this week. We're actually going to take 2 weeks to work through this. The first 3 columns would be part of our assignment for this first week, and the last 2 columns will be something we'll pick up next week. So, the little skinny columns that you see are on the handout are columns of information that are reference only. And you can see that the first one is titled Anterior Muscle Picture, second one Posterior Muscle Picture, third one says Model, and the fourth one says Cat. The handouts that I gave you with this table of muscles that were white, they showed the whole human body from a superficial perspective. Those pictures have no labels, they are numbered. And the numbers in these 2 lists, one list of numbers for the front facing picture, the anterior picture, and the other list of numbers for the posterior facing picture. Those numbers will help you identify those muscles. The models that we use in class of the human lower limb, those are referenced there in the 3rd column, and then the 4th column indicates which muscles we're actually finding and dissecting in the cat. And anything with a plus sign in it there is a muscle that we will have dissected and found in our cats. And so this handout and its layout is important to our study of muscles. When we look at the muscles that we're going to study, we're looking into the lower limb. There are actually 4 segments of the lower limb that have muscles in them. We're only going to be studying 3 of those. We're going to study muscles here in the hip. And if you look at your list, you see there are 8 muscles in 3 groups. There are muscles of the thigh. We have a few more muscles in the thigh area. On the back of your handout is a list of muscles in the leg. Those are down there. And although there are muscles down in your foot, I am not going to have us study muscles of the foot. There are a lot of muscles here, and there's so many that something has to be left out. So you should be aware as a good student of human anatomy that there literally are muscles in the structure of your foot, but we won't be studying any of those. Okay, so let's go back and look at these groups then. One of the things I've done is taken the muscles here of the hip and divided them into 3 compartments. You can see one is listed as the anterior compartment. Those would be muscles, right, of course, in the anterior aspect of the hip. Muscles here in the posterior compartment, you can see those include the gluteus muscles, and notice there are 3 of those. And then there are a couple of muscles that are deep, that can't be seen superficially where we are. And in reality, there's about 6 or 8 of those muscles. I've only included 2 for us to learn. The muscles of the thigh, you can see likewise there are 3 compartments here. There's an anterior compartment. You're looking right at that in this picture. There's a medial compartment. The muscles of the thigh, a group of them, bulge medially there between the 2 thighs. And then there is a compartment of muscles out in the back. And of course, this is going to provide a nice way to divide up all of these muscles. You don't want to study these as a huge group. You want to study them in small groups, what you and I are probably by now calling bite-sized pieces. A short group of muscles that you can tackle over time and learn well, and then take another small group, work through those, take your time, and just section by section. If you could divide your days, divide your day after day into small amounts of time, something as simple as a morning, an afternoon, and as an evening, each of these 2 major areas could be tackled in a day. If you took the muscles of the hip and studied that anterior compartment in a morning and posterior compartment in an afternoon and the deep compartment in an evening, and then the muscles of the thigh the next day, and just a couple of days, you could have this entire front side of the handout mastered. So that is something I would highly suggest. As you study these, you want to be looking at pictures like the ones you see here. These are pictures from your textbook, and you can see this shows the hip, anterior hip muscles and the anterior thigh muscles. You can see both muscles of the anterior hip, and you can see 3 plus 1, you can see 4 out of the 5 muscles of the anterior thigh. In addition to that, this muscle shows you most of the muscles in the medial thigh as well, and could be used for that study. Let me tell you about another way that you could study these. There's a website called Get Body Smart. And those 3 words pushed together, .com, Get Body Smart, all one word, .com, is a site with a home page that looks like this. And you can see that the current subject areas do include the muscular system. And you can go there and in an interactive way study the various muscles of the human body. And they're all in groups like we're studying. There's muscles in the hip and muscles in the thigh and muscles in the leg. And so I would recommend that you go and check this out. It has a quizzing component that can test you on what you've studied, see how well you know it. The pictures they use are these same pictures that I'm showing you right here, which is pretty cool. So, and by the way, when I finally test you through a quiz or on a test to see if you can identify these muscles and any of their other details, these are the pictures I will use. I do have blank images of these on our Blackboard website, and so you might want to check that out and download some blank ones, and from time to time see if you could label them from blank. Okay, so these are the images that we'll be studying from. You would also be wise to just maybe put side by side with this the pictures on those muscle handouts that I gave you as well, so that you can see how the pictures are identical. would be a great exercise to study both pictures at the same time. You will have to identify the muscles in either picture. So studying them together would probably halve your study time. So let me encourage you to do that. So number one, and more important than anything, is for you to first learn all of the names of the muscles. Be able to find these muscles in the pictures. In other words, locate them in the human body and get familiar with their names and locations. I'm actually, on a test or a quiz, going to reward knowing the names to a greater extent than any of the other facts that I want you to know. If I ask you any of the other facts that you see on this list, and you can't name them, but you can give me the name of the muscle that I'm indicating, I will still give you some credit for that. So you are wise if you first and completely and thoroughly know the name of each and every muscle. You can pass every quiz and every part of the test by just knowing that. Now, the other details will give you a better grade, but trying to learn too much can also even throw away a passing grade on quizzes or tests. So let me just emphasize, learning the names is critical. Now, once you've done that, once you know the names of the muscles, then, especially this first week or so, the other thing I'm going to ask of you is that you then try and learn the names of the origins and the insertions. Now, you can see these two columns are titled origin and insertion. So let me familiarize you with what those terms mean. Okay, let's get a few facts that are true about muscles. Most people know what muscles do, but they don't think technically about the interaction of muscles and bones. And basically, muscles are in your human body to move your bones. Your bones give your body structure, but the muscles will cause them to move. And there's always a joint involved. Muscles do their job because they attach. A muscle typically has two ends. Those ends attach to two different bones, and it attaches across a joint. Therefore, when the muscle pulls, the two bones move at the joint that is between them. So, when you understand that, then we come to the words origin and insertion. The two ends of the muscle are named by these. So, one of the two ends of the muscle will typically act as an anchor for the muscle or a fixed point. That is the end of the muscle where you typically don't see any motion. The other end of the muscle is typically attached to the bone that is moving, and that end of the muscle and its attachment, literally where it's attached, is referred to as the insertion of the muscle. Okay, let's look at a simple example. This might help flesh it out. Here is a muscle. I'm looking at what is called the biceps muscle of the arm. It's the one that bulges when somebody makes a muscle, like this is. The movement of the muscle is like this, right? So if you were to describe what that muscle does, you would say, well, it pulls the forearm up toward your shoulder. And if you look closely at the connective tissues of this bicep muscle, you can see that the connective tissues that are anchored up here are anchored into bones of the shoulder. So this end of the muscle would be referred to as its origin. And this end down here you can see is attached to one of the two bones in the forearm, and this would be referred to as the insertion. not because of where it's attached, but because of what's moving. When a person moves their forearm with this muscle, the shoulder isn't moving, the forearm is. So the shoulder attachments are the origin, and the moving attachment, the attachment onto the bone of the forearm, is the insertion. So if we go back to our list here, and to these two columns, if you look down them right now, I'm hoping there are things there that you recognize. Please look at them right now. Look at the individual terms. Do you recognize anything there? And the answer, of course, should be almost everything. If you know your bones well by now, iliac fossa, lesser trochanter, gluteal surface, greater trochanter, tibia, iliac crest, ischial tuberosity, tibial tuberosities, linea aspera, the list goes on and on. Yes, these are all common bony features, and you should have visual images in your mind of these features on the bones. So, having learned the bones already really sets you up to do well here. And let me show you how having learned the muscles sets you up to do well, and that it's not going to be as hard as you might think to learn these origins and insertions. Let me illustrate that. Let's look at two muscles here. These happen to be the very first two muscles in your list. Now, what are their names? Well, one of these two muscles is called iliacus, and the other is psoas major. And being that we have only these two muscles with the entire skeleton, I'm hoping that through a process of deduction that you can figure out which of these two muscles is which, right? Without looking at your handout. Which of these two do you think is the iliacus? If you said this one, you're absolutely right. And hopefully, even with the muscle covering it, you can visualize that. I mean, just look over on the left-hand side for a minute. I mean, our left-hand side of the picture, the actual right-hand side of the skeleton, and you can see the ilium there, right? Stands to reason that the muscle that is anchored there onto the ilium is referred to as iliacus. That means that the other muscle here must be psoas major. Notice this word is pronounced with a silent P, like the word psychology, right? So if you think to not pronounce the first P there, simply say psoas major. So your first task, if you're studying muscles, would be simply to recognize where these two muscles are located on the skeleton and to give them their names. Now, the muscle pictures that we're typically studying are a little more complicated because they have many more muscles clustered around them, and yet these two are pretty obvious in and of themselves. They can be seen easily in those muscle pictures that you're studying, and they can be found very easily in that website, Get Body Smart. So this would be, for you, goal number one. And your goal is to embed this image into your mind so that you can literally see it. And even without the names now, can you point to and name those two muscles? Let me give you a second. Try it out. Excellent. I bet you could do it. Now, the other question is, can you see these two muscles even if you were not looking at them? Okay? My question is, can you still see them? Can you visualize the vertebral column? Can you visualize the pelvic girdle there with the ilium sticking up and the pubis coming around down in front and the femurs attached into the acetabula? Can you see that skeleton with these muscles? That's what you want to do. Fix that image in your mind. Now, this little lesson right here isn't going to do it for you. But if you get a picture like this and you carry that picture around with you for several hours, and just keep looking back at it and practice naming those, just a few moments at a time, over and over again, for a morning, an afternoon, or an evening, you're going to know these two muscles. In fact, carry several pictures. Get those pictures that I have on Blackboard and do it with several different kinds of pictures until you thoroughly recognize these two muscles. So my question again is, can you see these muscles? Can you picture these? Do you have that image in your mind right now? That is the goal. Then you can go about making sure that you can name them. Now, that is goal number one. And you should do that with each and every muscle in the list. Okay? First. So do those things first. Don't study any origins or insertions until you have all the muscle names and images firmly embedded in your mind. That will give you a passing grade. Every semester I have too many students that don't do what I'm telling them to, and they don't get a passing grade on the quiz. And it's simply because they don't start by learning all the names. Now, once that is done, then try to learn the origins and insertions of as many muscles as you can. And even learning a few of these with all of the names mastered can give you a B or an A on the quiz. You don't even have to necessarily know every single one. Let's look at these two muscles. Now, you know where the iliacus is. And you can see that right in the center of that muscle, I shouldn't say the center, the upper part of the muscle is where we would place the origin of this muscle, right about there. Now, without looking at your handout, if you know these bones well, you should be able to tell me what feature is there and what it is called. I mean, simply look on the opposite side of the skeleton there and look where it's attached. You should be able to tell me that that is the iliac fossa. You don't need a list. You don't need a handout. If you know the skeleton, you can literally see that. You know that. Okay? So, this is not a matter of learning some words on a page. It's learning what muscles go with what features on the bone. And so, the origin of the iliacus muscle is the iliac fossa. Now, the other end of the muscle down here is the insertion. And where are all those muscle fibers going? They're going to the inside. What feature do I know that pokes out medially, and I should say somewhat posteriorly? Again, if you look over on the other side of the skeleton, you can see there's a lump of bone right there. It's only one lump. There's only one feature there to identify, and that, of course, is the lesser trochanter. So, just from a careful observation of the position of this muscle, where it's located, where on the skeleton it's attached, I can come up with these two facts. I do not need a piece of paper to do that. Now, I would say if you're doing this, take a picture like this, make a good guess. Verify it with the picture or correct it. If you guessed wrong, correct it with the picture. But don't study the words on the paper. Study the pictures so you can clearly see origin and insertion. People that are being successful with this are doing it like this. Now, if we turn our attention to the other muscle here, the psoas major, its origin is up here. And you can see it's clearly attached to 6 vertebrae. And by now, you know how to name the vertebra. You see at the top there, T12, and then L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. So if I was indicating the origin of this muscle, I would say that it's right there. And good news here, these 2 muscles are partners. They're in the same group on your list. Pardon me. And they both insert onto the same place on the skeleton. Both muscles have the lesser trochanter as their insertion. So, I just want you to see that the process of studying these muscles is not a process of studying some words on a piece of paper, but visualizing these muscles, using the pictures that you have here to visualize these muscles as real objects, and visualizing the skeleton that you've come to know, and seeing the relationships between the muscles and the bones. And that's what this study of origins and insertions is. What will come out of this is a good knowledge of origins and insertions, then will make the understanding of what movements these muscles cause fairly self-explanatory. These 2 muscles cross the front of the pelvic girdle, grab onto the femur, and hopefully you could see that if those muscles were to pull up toward their origins, pull that femur up towards them, the femur would come forward and up. And we are soon going to be describing the names of these motions, and we're learning the names of the joints. And so shortly after we've learned origins and insertions, we're going to be able to, again, in a relationship way, put actions to each one of these muscles in a very understandable way. So that's the idea. I'm not going to go through each and every muscle on your list with you like this. I know you can do this same thing that I've just done here with the various pictures, and that is your job. So I'm not going to literally do everyone with you right now in this lecture, but would ask you to do this yourself, okay? All right. Let me at least do this with you, though. Let me go over another group of muscles. Let's look at the posterior hip muscles. And here is a very lateral view. You'll see the pictures that you're going to be studying from don't show you a list that's quite so lateral. The pictures that you have in your textbook show you muscles anteriorly and more posteriorly, but this is close to what you would be looking at. And I do have these pictures online for you to look at, the pictures from this lecture. So let's name these. Posterior hip group, if you're looking at it, has 4 muscles in it. Only 3 of them are visible right here, one of them being hidden. And let's just point out which one is which. This is gluteus maximus, so this is the posterior aspect of a lateral view of the hip. You could also tell this if you look down at the knee. You can see the kneecap is there pointing anteriorly. So that would be another clue, which direction is which. You can see that the pubis in the picture up there in the hip is not covered. So you also know that that's the anterior direction on this picture. So gluteus maximus is there in the back. Second muscle, gluteus medius, you can see here is absolutely lateral on the hip. There's a small, slender muscle toward the front of this lateral posterior group. This is the anteriormost of the posterior group, called tensor fasciolata. Big, fancy name for a fairly small muscle. The fourth muscle in this group is hidden and is a muscle called gluteus minimus. So 3 of the muscles here are called gluteus muscles. And you can see by their other names that size is being referenced here. So you've got a big one, right? A medium one, and a little one. And I don't know about you, but I like to think of things that help me remember stuff like this. And I don't know, you remember a story from childhood that might have had a big one, a medium one, and a little one in it? Perhaps you remember a story of the 3 bears, right? 3 bears. There's a papa bear, a mama bear, and a baby bear. Big one, a medium one, a little one. Goldilocks goes into their house, and she's lost, and she goes into their house and eats their food and sits in their chairs and sleeps on their beds, and there's always a big one, a medium one, a little one. Anyway, this reminds me of that because I want to say this is the story of tensor fasciolata and the 3 gluteals, I guess. Anyway, the picture that I just showed you here too shows you a picture of that gluteus minimus. Imagine the other 3 muscles removed. Now you can see the sacrum and more of the ilium, and you can see that the gluteus minimus sits right underneath the gluteus medius, totally hidden by it. And I guess if I was telling my story, I would say that baby bear is probably the shy one in the story, hiding behind mama's skirts. So totally hidden in the muscle category here by the gluteus medius. Goldilocks surely isn't the shy one in the story. She goes into somebody's house, eats their food, and sleeps in their bed. So anyway, something a little different, a little crazy, a little odd like that can help you remember muscles. Once you've learned the names, then you try and learn origins and insertions. And you can see that there are muscles here on the gluteal surface, the tensor fasciolata up there on the anterior part of the iliac crest. Gluteus maximus, you can see, is really all the way around to the posterior part of the ilium and the sacrum. And then you can pick up their insertions later on too. There is one insertion in this list, though, that you wouldn't know. If you look at the tensor fasciolata and the gluteus maximus, they both insert onto the same basic structure. And the list that you have there says it's the tibia. Now that should give you some pause if you've really thought about it. If you're not thinking about it, you just go, oh, it's that. Or if you were just studying some words, you'd go, oh, it's that. I need to learn that. But if you picture it here, where's the tibia? Well, it's all the way at the bottom of the picture. How do muscles clustered all the way up here in the hip, forming your buttock muscle, have anything to do with the major bone all the way down in your leg? And of course, the way that happens is through a piece of connective tissue that I've just highlighted here called the iliotibial tract. And in its name, you see that it's indicated being extending from the ilium all the way down to the tibia. And that's what this does. It allows the tensor fasciolata and part of the gluteus maximus to anchor into its superior end. Its inferior end is anchored down onto the lateral side of the tibia there. And so those 2 muscles, part of gluteus maximus and tensor fasciolata, are actually attached to the tibia, not up somewhere there in the hip. And when they pull, they pull on the tibia. So, kind of an interesting thing. Tensor fasciolata muscle actually says that in its name. It tenses or tightens the connective tissue on the lateral side of the thigh. The fasciolata literally means the connective tissue on the lateral side of the thigh. So, iliotibial tract is one of a few pieces of connective tissue that you will need to learn. So if you can learn it as part of these origins and insertions, you're in pretty good shape. So make sure you can identify here the iliotibial tract. I'll take the color away, but you can still see that white, dense connective tissue that's forming that connection between the hip and the tibia. So make sure you do learn that. You can see in the name it says those muscles are attached to the tibia via, means by way of, the iliotibial tract. So, okay. So group by group, one by one, should be attacking these, learning the names. Once you've learned all of the names, go back through a second time and learn these origins and insertions. Okay? So here's your list. We've got it divided up. We know what we need to do this week, what we need to do next week. On the posterior side here, you only have to study 3 leg muscles. So you've got the 6 groups on the front and only 1 group here, only a total of 7 groups of muscles here. But you do need to know names, origins, and insertions. Now, don't worry about learning any of the other details of these muscles or of these groups right now. Just learn this. This is what's going to be on the quiz. So the next thing I'm going to tell you is not for the quiz or not for the test, but will be something for you to just remember for later, okay? There are 3 other groups on your list that I've hidden, and I'm hiding right now, that you don't need to learn. But let me just say this. Once we get over to where we've learned the actions of the various muscles that you're learning right now, I am going to come back and just add the compartments, not the names of the muscles. But I am going to ask that you would know the muscles in the front of the leg do these 2 things. And like I said, don't worry about it now, because these 2 things, you don't know what they mean right now. Okay? So don't worry about it right now. The lateral compartment there has a description of what the 2 muscles in that group do. Again, don't need to know those muscles, but you will need to know what muscles in that location of the leg do. And then that posterior group has 2 functions there too. And I'm going to ask that of you later, but I will explain that this whole thing again at a later time. But just so you would know, okay. So that's what's going on with the muscles down here in the leg. Just 3 muscles that you need to know, just this one group here. And the rest of that information will come later. Okay? So don't learn these right now. Okay? So basically see each group as a separate object to study. Study your way group by group. I would hope that when this is done, and I know you'd be successful if you get this done, that if I simply said to you, oh, name the muscles, the 2 muscles of the deep compartment of the hip, that you could just tell those to me. Or if I said, tell me the 5 muscles of the medial compartment of the thigh, you could just tell me those 5 muscles, just boom, 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 boom. So if you can do that, if you can attack these one group at a time, learn them well, then learn their origins and insertions, you will be set up to do well on a quiz or a test, and you will actually truly know the muscles and their relationships to the bones. Okay? So, do well, study your way through. If you have any other questions, we'll answer those in class. So, away you go. Thanks for listening.